Hey, this is Troy Taylor with the Championship Football Coaches Clinic on Totem Pole Sports. And we have Coach Cheetah, Derek Jones, in the house today. I want to give Coach his flowers because, a couple weeks ago he came by the school and he watched me teach. And then he took a picture outside with me and he posted, and said that I was charismatic and I had great elite energy, and that meant so much to me, Coach. You never know, like, just how you can motivate somebody just with a few words. But so I want to say thank you for that, and just introduce yourself to the clinic and where all you've been, Coach, because you've been all over the place.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Coach Derek Jones. I am from Woodruff, South Carolina, and I went to school at University of Ole Miss, better known as University of Mississippi. See how I said that backwards? A lot of times when I say University of Mississippi, people look at me funny because they know Ole Miss. But anyway, started my coaching career at the University of Mississippi under David Cutcliffe, who's my longtime mentor and a guy that I was fortunate enough to spend 14 years of my coaching career with. Between Ole Miss and Duke. And after my time at Ole Miss as a graduate assistant, trying to learn the ropes, I got a job with Joe Panunzio, who had been an assistant coach under Tommy Tuberville when I played at Murray State University. And hats off to Coach Panunzio. He's getting a chance to coach in the Super Bowl next weekend with the Philadelphia Eagles. Great mentor of mine, great friend, great family friend. So really fortunate for my years at Murray State, because at Murray State, I learned a lot of the things that I still incorporate into my coaching style right now. When I was at Murray State University, we didn't have a big budget, and Murray State was not a place that a lot of people knew about. So you had to kind of go above and beyond to be able to reach kids, to get them to have interest in the university and drive up to campus to visit the place and even come there. And we didn't have the budget to fly, so we got in the car at the drop of a hat to drive to Georgia, to drive to Florida, to drive to Louisiana, or anywhere else. And that's all I really knew. So I'm never above doing those things, even though I've been able to go on and coach at some other places. But spent 5 years at Murray State. I was fortunate enough to get a job at Middle Tennessee State. But a unique story between my transition between Murray State and Middle Tennessee State. Coach Brett Pry, who I work for right now, was coaching at Louisiana Lafayette. And right about my fifth year, after my fifth season at Murray State, I tore my knee up during that season, getting a little bit too excited on the sideline. Back then, we had the old turf, the carpet that didn't give. And one of my guys picked off an interception. I was running with him and realized I was about to the 25-yard line and tried to make an abrupt stop. And I stopped, but my knee kept going. So I tore my ACL. And went on to coach.
Had you ever been to ACL City before, Coach?
Nah, that was my first time, and I played a pretty lengthy career without any injuries, and I decided to get into this coaching thing and tore my knee up within my first 5 years. So I guess that says a lot about my ability or my mental capacity or common sense in that word. But after that fifth season at Murray State, I got a couple of different calls about jobs, and my wife and I kind of decided that, we wanted to move on and wanted to at least entertain moving on. And I got a call from Coach Pry. He was working for Ricky Bustle at Louisiana Lafayette, and I didn't know Coach Pry. And we talked probably for about an hour on the phone initially. And then he called me back and told me that he wanted to fly me in on an interview. Well, at the time, I was in this air cast. Back then, they used to put you in this brace, and it had water in it, and I had to kind of sit on the couch. So I was basically confined to my living room. And, naturally, I wanted to have some type of insight into what the job entailed, but I knew I couldn't go to Lafayette to interview. So he and I talked for a little bit. I don't think, well, he says I never told him that my knee was torn, but I did tell him that I couldn't fly. I guess he assumed maybe that I was afraid to fly. I don't have no idea what the situation was, but he ended up flying to Nashville. And from Nashville, you have to drive about 2.5 hours to get to Murray. So that was an adventure in itself. And, this guy walks into my house, and I've got my wife in the living room with me, and he walks in, and I am literally confined to the couch. I can't get up, and he's interviewing me for a cornerback job of all things. And anybody that knows anything about cornerback play, and if you've ever had a job interview, it's not a lot of X's and O's. It's not a lot of talking. It's, do you know how to teach this? Do you know how to demonstrate this in a lot of situations? And those were the things I needed to do, but I couldn't do. So needless to say, Coach Pry and I went through the interview process, and I had my poor little wife, who's never been an athlete of any kind, trying to demonstrate those drills for me. And it didn't go well as far as that's concerned. But that was the birth of the friendship between Coach Pry and I. And fortunately for me, probably the next week after I interviewed with Coach Pry, I interviewed with Coach Andy McCullum at Middle Tennessee State, and I did get that job. And I was at Middle Tennessee State for a year, went on to the University of Tulsa in Oklahoma, left there, went to the University of Memphis under Tommy West, who had recruited me out of high school when he was the defensive coordinator at the University of South Carolina. And also he became the head coach at Clemson. We got put on probation at Ole Miss. He recruited me again to transfer back home. Although I decided to stay, I had a lot of respect for Coach West. And then after my year at Memphis, David Cutcliffe got the job at Duke. And, David Cutcliffe was my guy, gave me my very first job. And I went on to spend the next 12 years of my career, 2008 to 2019 at Duke University with David Cutcliffe. Left there in 2019, went 2 years with my friend Matt Wells, who I'd worked with at the University of Tulsa in Oklahoma for 2 years. And last year, over a year ago, Coach Pry told me that he was pursuing the Virginia Tech job, and he called me and he's like, I think I may have a shot at this thing, but I need to know some people that are going to be aligned with me to sell and trying to get this job so that it's an attraction, so that I am an attraction to them. And I told him immediately. I had a couple of different things going on, but immediately with him telling me he had a shot to go to Virginia Tech, I told him that if you get it, I'm 100% on board with you. I knew the history of Virginia Tech from being at Duke that long, and I'd recruited against these guys, and it just allowed me to do a lot of the things that I'm comfortable doing, being back in a lot of my same recruiting areas. So it was a natural fit. So I'm glad he got that job. I'm glad he didn't give me the job the very first go around. I wouldn't be able to tell you the story that I just told you, but I'm really, really elated to be at Virginia Tech University.
Yeah, Coach, and I'm a Virginia guy, and I'm a homer, and I don't think I've ever had a kid that had a Virginia Tech offer that went out of state. I think kids should stay at home. I guess that's kind of a South Carolina type mentality. You're from South Carolina. I know you went to Ole Miss, Coach, but I bet you there were some coaches at South Carolina and Clemson that was upset about that. I got Coach James Tim, Coach, is on here, and he has a question. He actually went to East Stroudsburg, and I know Coach Brent Pry went to East Stroudsburg and played for Otis Flowers, who I coached with at Virginia Union. He wants to know, what was the biggest mental challenge you've had to overcome so far in your career? How did you master it now?
I think when you coach college football, the biggest thing you have to do is learn how to balance family in your career. That's very important.
Coach, talk about that a little bit, Coach, because, some of us have gone to Divorce City, or some guys are headed to that city. Talk to us a little bit about that, Coach.
I think the first thing, it has to start with self. You have to understand what the number one thing you are is. And if you're a husband, that's a husband. If you're a father, that's a father. And that can never be compromised. Because one thing I'll tell you about this profession, you just heard a lot about my career and where I've been. The one constant that's been the same as my family has been with me throughout all of those stops. And I'll tell you this, you can pour your heart and soul into an institution, a university, but the reality of it is, when your time is up there, very rarely do they call you back to invite you to reunions. So you better understand that you better take care of your family. But more importantly, man, you have to find the balance yourself. I am very, very good when it comes to leaving my job at my job. And I know you hear some guys talk about they never get off of their cell phone and they shower with their cell phone. I'm never going to do that at all, because I have people at home that are waiting on me. And who am I to talk about? It's important to me to mentor young men, and it's important to me to pour into young men, and I'm neglecting to do that with my own family. Regardless of what happens, win, loss, tension at work, or whatever may happen, when I hit that garage door opener in my car, that's the end of the workday for me mentally. I don't bring my job home, and I have mastered that. because, it's not
Have
fair.
you always been like that, Coach, or is that something you learned?
Yeah, for the most part, I've been like that. And I've been fortunate enough to work for a lot of people that understood and were aligned with me and my beliefs. I think when you're choosing jobs, and I learned this just by observation and watching people, you have to be very careful about what you want out of coaching. A lot of guys coach because they're passionate about it. A lot of guys coach because it matters, but a lot of guys coach because it provides a good life. And I think that's where you have to be very careful from the financial standpoint, because we are rewarded on this level from a financial standpoint. But I personally refuse to work for someone that doesn't understand exactly what I just told you, because I owe it to my wife. I owe it to my kids to be a husband and a father to them. And I refuse to compromise that. I don't think it is necessary to sleep at an office. I've had a pretty good career not doing that. I don't think it's necessary to walk into my house on my cell phone and not acknowledge my family or eat dinner because I'm recruiting. I've had a pretty good career of recruiting not doing that. And again, I think it's just the blueprint. I mean, if you have a schedule of how you want to do things, and I'm not saying that sometimes you don't have to do those things, but I'm not going to be a father that walks into my house on my phone on a regular basis, because that's not the way I want my daughters to remember me. That's not the way I want my wife to see me. I want to be able to come in and ask them how their day went. And to be honest with you, if you're recruiting a bunch of people where that's necessary, you're recruiting the wrong people.
Mm.
You can find time to deal with these guys. I'm very upfront with recruits from the beginning and telling them, I'm not going to monopolize your time, because that's not fair to you. Because I know if I was a father and I came home and I saw one of my daughters on the phone for 3, 4, 5 hours doing something that's not productive, in a sense, I would intervene. Nobody has 4 or 5 hours in a day to entertain recruiters, because that's not the way life is structured. But you want to recruit people that understand that to prioritize their time. But at the same time, I want to explain to those parents and those kids, I want you to understand that this is your last year or your last 2 years at home with your family. After this, there's not going to be any more family meals. After this, there's not going to be any more opportunities to play video games with little brother, little sister. After this, there's not going to be any time to read your little brother, little sister a book. You only have a few months to do this. So I want to be respectful of that. And I want to educate you and make you understand how valuable that is, because once you enter the college football world, everything that you knew before that is no longer the same thing.
Yeah. So, Coach, you have your priorities in line. And James Tim, I nicknamed him Coach Cyborg. He said last night, he said faith, family, and football. I mean, that's Vince Lombardi, and it seems like that is your priorities, Coach. And that's why you've been so successful. Coach Cutcliffe, for those that don't know, I mean, he coached Peyton Manning at University of Tennessee. He coached the other Manning. I'm sorry, Eli at Ole Miss. And I mean, Daniel Jones, I can see why he was a first round pick, man. I mean, he's just a huge human. I mean, he looks bigger than their offensive line. I got to go watch the Giants play the Redskins. I mean, he's big guy, man. And he's coached by David Cutcliffe. Talk a little bit about Coach Cutcliffe, Coach. Why has he been so successful? What is Coach Cutcliffe's background that made him who he is?
Coach Cutcliffe is from Alabama, and he was a high school coach at Banks High School in Alabama.
Wow. I never knew that.
And, he was wanting to break into the college football world. And, he went to the University of Tennessee and made Coach Johnny Majors aware of that.
Wow.
And he was able to get a job with Coach Johnny Majors. And, back in that era, and when I say that era, it wasn't that long ago because I was playing, but, there wasn't a musical chairs of coaching like it is now, back in the 80s and the early 90s. When you saw head coaches and you saw staffs, guys had been on same staffs for double-digit years. And that was pretty common. So Coach Cutcliffe spent the vast majority of his career as an assistant coach, worked his way up to offensive coordinator at the University of Tennessee under Johnny Majors. I think his first stint was maybe 18 years, that he was there.
Wow.
And he got the head coaching job at my alma mater, the University of Mississippi, after Tommy Tuberville left to go to Auburn. And that's where I met him. Fortunately for me, Coach Cutcliffe knew about me because he had coached against me. He was the offensive coordinator at Tennessee, and I was playing corner at University of Mississippi. So they had scouted us with him being the quarterback coach. Those guys generally know a little bit more about the corners than anybody else because they want to seek out your weaknesses and see what they can get done. But, my first conversation with him was a good one. He knew about me and expressed his respect for me as a player. And to be honest with you, man, I'm overly grateful to Coach Cutcliffe because I didn't really want to know what I wanted to do with my life when I finished playing. And I was told by one of my coaches that I needed to be a coach. Tommy Tuberville actually told me that. I was actually trying to get Tommy Tuberville to help me with the Dallas Cowboys because they had called me, and I knew he had a lot of connections out there from his time in Arkansas State and Miami, and he kind of gave me some harsh love. He told me that I needed to quit chasing that dream and I needed to focus on something that I could do for the rest of my life. And he told me, he said, you were a great player here at Ole Miss, and you were a good captain. He said, but if I'm in the NFL, I'm always trying to replace you because you're 5'9". And although I knew that at the time, I was a little bit insulted by his comments. But I'm grateful to him as well, because oftentimes people see things in you that you don't see in yourself. And I never really thought about coaching in my life. I went to school with the thought process that I wanted to be a lawyer. I was a criminal justice, political science major, and I felt like once the whole football thing was over with, that's what I was going to do. But Coach Tuberville actually told me that he had a graduate assistant job coming open, and he said these jobs are hard to come by. He said, you go think about it for a day or so and come back and let me know. He said, because I have a lot of people that want this opportunity. So I kind of walked out of the weight room that day with my tail tucked between my legs, and I went and thought about it. But immediately I knew that he was telling the truth, and I was grateful that he was offering me an opportunity to still be around the game of football. But unfortunately, I didn't know a lot about football. And what I mean is I played corner. I could play the game, but I didn't understand a lot of the ins and outs of football. I didn't know what a 3 technique was. I didn't know what a 9 technique was. I didn't know any of that. I didn't know what an X stunt was. I didn't know what a T stunt was. I got to college and I played for a guy named Joe Lee Dunn, and all you had to worry about was the man in front of you.
So yeah, he's the guy that invented the 3-5-3.
Yes, sir.
I mean, Mike Fanoga worked for him. I can't remember where. I coached with Mike at Virginia Union, and Mike was, with Hal Mummy at Kentucky and with Hal Mummy pretty much everywhere. But yeah, I mean, Coach, there's a funny story Mike told me about Coach Lee Dunn, who they were getting ready to play Nebraska, and he asked me, he said, Coach, what's the game plan? And he was coaching, and Mike said that he told him, just show up. And in the beginning of the game, he said, I only want one guy in a stance because they was running the triple. So like everybody was standing up other than like the nose guard, man. So golly, you got some stories now, man. Joe Lee Dunn. I mean, did he wear cut-off jeans? And did he only use the chalkboard?
He wore regular jeans, but he never wore socks. I can't recall ever seeing him with anything but the same pair of tennis shoes on, whether it was practice or a game. And he was just a genuine guy, man. I think my time around Coach Dunn has really allowed me to keep a simple mind frame in coaching. Oftentimes I look at coaches and they have these elaborate game plans with all this stuff on it, and we sit in these offices, and I'm very outspoken when it comes to that because of Joe Lee Dunn, because you're talking about a guy who never went into a game with a piece of paper. The guy didn't wear headsets. And, man, we were the #1 defense in the nation at the University of Mississippi under him. And it was aggressive. He saw what he saw, but he was always quick to tell us, I'm not going to waste a lot of time trying to figure out what somebody's going to do, but I am going to be prepared to counter when they do it. And so that's just the way I think as a coach. So I think you can overload as a coach in trying to come up with answers for everything. And sometimes when you try to do everything, you don't get good at anything.
Yeah.
And we were able to get good at the things that we did back then. Coach Dunn was a big pursuit guy. Coach Dunn was a big leverage guy. And those are still the same things that help you win playing defensive football. So I was fortunate to be around him, again, not knowing I was going to become a coach, but I took a lot of things from him. He passed away a couple of years ago, but I'm grateful for my time around him. And, again, that's just not my coaching background, but a little bit of who I've become as a coach of people that have been in my history. I was fortunate to go through that, and Coach Cutcliffe gave me an opportunity, and I learned on the run. So to speak. And again, I'm glad for my 5 years at Murray State because it was on a smaller scale and it was with someone who I knew, and I had a margin of error. Coach Panunzio was real instrumental in teaching me and allowing me to grow and allowing me to learn. And I learned a lot at each stop. And I think the conclusion of that was when I got with Coach Cutcliffe again in 2008, reuniting with him, I had reached the level of maturity where I was 100% on board with being a coach, wanting to learn. But, when you work for a guy like David Cutcliffe, you have to be on your P's and Q's every day. You don't go to a staff meeting with a guy like him and not know what you're doing. You don't come unprepared. And everything you do has to be attention to detail. So by being around him for 12 years,
And why is that, Coach? Why is that? Is that because you don't want to let him down, or is it you don't want to deal with the ramifications? What is it that causes that?
All of the above. But he was just a guy that, first and foremost, I believe that you learn, and I learned this by watching my father. I believe you learn how to be, or the most effective things people can instill in you are things that they do themselves. The best example you can be is a walking example. I mean, I can tell my players how to do things. I can tell my players what they should and shouldn't do. But when they watch me and see how I carry and conduct myself, I truly believe that's the best lessons that they're going to learn from me. My father never told me a whole lot about how to treat a woman, but I watched how my father treated my mother. And I see that in myself now, because that was just a blueprint of every day in my household, what I saw growing up. And I watched David Cutcliffe as a graduate assistant. So I knew what he brought to the table. And I watched how he demanded his assistants to be attention to detail. And I think the one thing he understood was, at his time at Ole Miss, we're not as talented as a lot of the teams that we have to play. So we have to do the little things better than everybody else. And fast forward, when I went on to work for him at Duke, it was deja vu in that sense on a whole nother level. When we got to Duke, they had won, I think, 10 games in 8 years. There wasn't a conference championship anywhere in recent history. And there was a lot that we had to do. I can remember it was maybe our first or second day on the job, and we walked around campus. We watched the team work out that morning, and we went to our first staff meeting. And he pulled out a pen, got on the grease board, and he said, guys, we've seen a lot around here today. He said, I want to go around the room and ask you guys, what do you think we should do, or what do we need to do to be successful here? And in that room was a lot of guys, man, that are doing really well in the coaching profession right now. I think myself and Zach Roper were the two youngest full-time staff members at the time, and Scotty Montgomery. He was the one holdover from the new staff. But, Matt Luke was on that staff, who went on to become the head coach at the University of Mississippi. Mike McIntyre was on that staff, who's been the head coach at San Jose, Colorado, and now FIU. Ron Middleton was on that staff. He's with the Jets. Marion Hobby was on that staff. He's with the Cincinnati Bengals. So there was a lot of guys on that football staff that went on to become very successful. And so we just started talking about things we saw. And I mean, it was everything from facilities. It was everything from the practice field, the weight room. I mean, we just expressed our displeasure because a lot of us had SEC backgrounds, and Coach knew that. And at the time, we didn't realize what he was doing. But I think we probably got to 50 plus different things that we thought that we needed to improve or get at Duke University to be successful. And he finally looked at us and he said, guys, I want to tell you something. He said, I want y'all to look at this board. And we're looking at it. And he said, let me tell you something. Let this be the last time I hear either one of y'all say anything about anything on this board.
Yeah. What you going to do about it?
Yeah. Because the mindset of this place has been that. And we as assistant coaches, I as a head coach walk around this place talking about what we can't do, we'll never get it done. And I didn't realize how impactful it was at that time, but I knew from that moment on, I better not say anything about the football stadium. I better not say anything about the practice facility. We didn't have an indoor at that time. I think we may have had a 70-yard practice field that was turf, and we might have had a 50-yard practice field that was grass, and it wasn't in very good shape. But, we refused to allow that to be excuses for us because he didn't allow us to do it. And that's just the impact that he had. And we went on to accomplish great things at Duke under his tutelage. But again, never did we complain about any of those things. And a lot of those guys went on to become head coaches, and they carried those same philosophies. and enable them to become successful at that. So that's just the type of guy that he is. He's going to be a type of guy that you watch him, how he carries and conducts himself. So you can't be far off the mark, or you're not going to be able to be with him.
Yeah, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb. You're
Right.
not going to be there much longer, man. You got to be like him. I mean,
and having G8 for him, that's a lot of all I knew. And so I'm fortunate he was the first coach I was able to work up under, because I learned that. But, when I joined him, I knew the attention to detail that it was going to require for me to satisfy him. And naturally, that attention to detail allowed me to become a pretty successful football coach.
Yes. So just listening to you, I think about my dad, the old poem that I would rather see a sermon than hear one any day. And he wants to see you do it. He doesn't want it, for you to tell him about it. And then I think about, like, I listen to these videos like Mr. Beast, the guy that's got the most subscribers on YouTube. He says that he teaches people to be like him, but really all he's doing is he's not teaching people to actually be him, because that's what Coach Cutcliffe was doing. He was basically getting people that were on the same page as him, So Coach Panunzia, the coach at Murray State, Coach, I don't know much about him. Tell me about his background, and what was so good about him. And now he's coaching for a Super Bowl for the Eagles.
Well, Coach Panunzio joined us under Tuberville, and the second head coach I had at the University of Mississippi. And he had been at TCU. He had been at Minnesota. And I didn't know much about him at the time. But the one thing I'll say about Coach Panunzio is he's the best people person I've ever been around in my life.
What's so great about him? Why is that?
He knows how to connect with people. And he was very, very good at maintaining relationships. Matter of fact, I was telling a group of young guys at the convention about Coach Panunzio a few weeks back. I can remember riding in the car with Coach Panunzio from Murray, Kentucky to Mississippi, because Mississippi was a big recruiting area for us back then, because we had backgrounds there and it wasn't that far away. And I can remember sitting with him, and he must have made 30 phone calls during the time we were driving. And all the phone calls were to, like, boosters from Ole Miss, boosters from Auburn, people from Murray State, high school coaches. And the conversations were never long, but they were authentic. And it would be, if he had to leave a message, it would be, just calling to let you know you're on my mind. Hope you and the wife are doing well, man. Love you. Take care. Simple stuff like that. And to this day, Coach Panunzio still does that with me. He called me maybe last week, just checking in on you, my man. How's Nikita doing? How are the girls doing? And the conversations, again, are never long. I can remember when he hired me at Murray State, he had a stack of yellow slips on his desk. That's back when the secretaries wrote the messages on these slips and put them in your mailbox. He had a stack probably this thick on his desk. And I can remember him sitting there on his speakerphone, calling every single person that had called about a job back. Hey, I've got my staff full right now, man, but I really appreciate your interest. You know what I think about you. I'll always keep you. That's as simple as that. And he's charismatic and going about it. But I think the thing I learned most from Coach Panunzio was the importance of networking and communication, and the importance of making people feel special. And as crazy as this sounds, the importance of letting people down the right way.
Wow.
I mean, he's the type of guy that, most people would take, you're not going to be a part of my staff as rejection. But the way that he goes about it, it's just, can't help but to appreciate the guy. And Coach Panunzio went on to coach at Miami after that. But probably what he's done that's been most significant is he's been at Alabama for 2 different stints, and this is his second stint at Philadelphia. He went Alabama, Philadelphia Eagles. Coach Saban hired him back at Alabama, and then he went back to the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's been probably the latter part of his career, probably the last 10 to 12 years, what he's done at those 2 places. And, won national titles at Alabama, and now he's got a chance to win a Super Bowl at Philadelphia. And I couldn't be happier for him. But, if you ask anybody about Joe Panunzio, it would be hard-pressed for me to think anybody would have anything bad to say. I mean, he's the type of guy that leaves a positive impact no matter where he goes, and his track record shows that.
Yeah, I kind of did a little studying on charisma, Coach. And there's a book called Charisma Myth. And I didn't read the whole book, but I listened to a little video about, the summary of the book. but the three things that they say makes up charisma is presence. That
No
you,
doubt.
like you put your phone away. You probably already know this, coach. Power, that you have strength, and then warmth, that you have heart. And those are the three things. Have you ever heard of that, coach?
No, I hadn't heard that put in those words, but I totally agree with it, man.
Yeah, the charisma myth. Because you said that I had elite charisma and energy, so I was like, man, I've been told that my whole life. They go, Troy, you got a lot of charisma, But then there would be like, you need to stop thinking out loud. When I was a kid, because I would talk too much. So you take that feedback. James Tim has a question here. Are there tricks of the trade how to get your voice heard, getting your voice heard for job opportunities? I mean, I guess it goes back to those relationships and those that charisma, like Panunzio did.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you have to learn, when you're trying to climb the ladder of a profession or get opportunities that you're interested in, a lot of it is about who you know, more than anything else. And those things start early. And I think every job I've had, with the exception of the University of Tulsa, has been with and around people that I knew, that I had a connection with. And I am one of those people that I decided years ago that I was going to control my narrative because of the things I told you earlier about family and being aligned with the person. But when you are interested in doing something, the advice I would give you is this: you have to let people know what you're interested in doing. I have no way of knowing that you're interested in becoming a college football coach if you don't tell me that. And you have to use the connections that you get at clinics, when people come into your high schools, when you encounter coaches at clinics. And it's very important that you start to try to establish relationships, because one of the mistakes that people make is when a job opportunity comes available, people don't realize how many people are reaching out to guys on staff for that one job. There's 10 full-time assistants on the staff. There's a head coach, and there's probably 30 to 40 other people in that building that know other people. And that's one job, whether it's a graduate assistant job, whether it's an analyst job, whether it's a QC job. Well, if everybody on that staff has 10 people reaching out to them, that's a couple hundred people wanting that one job. And if I haven't heard from you, if I haven't talked to you until that job comes open, you're just like the other 30 people that are texting me at that moment. And when the head coach or whoever comes to ask me what I think about this person, what am I going to say? I met a guy at a clinic. It has to be a little bit more than that. One of the things that I do, and I've practiced this for years. Anybody that knows me sees my social media presence. I'm very consistent in getting up every morning, just like having my coffee. I'm going to put up 4 tweets on social media. They're random. They don't mean anything. They're not directed at anyone. It's just things I think people need to hear. It could be because of something I saw on CNN. It could be because of something I saw driving through the mountains. It just comes from all over the place. But it's brain exercise for me, helps me to wake up. But one of the other things that I do is when I sit down at my desk in the morning, I make it a habit to text 3 to 5 people. And I do that for no reason. It could be, Coach, man, great job last night. Got a chance to catch the tail end of the game. It could be, Coach, saw you and your wife on Twitter last night, man. Hope you guys enjoyed date night. It could be, Coach, man, tough loss. You guys will get it. See the improvements that you guys are making. Whatever it is, you have to be consistent in doing it. And I'm not looking for a job, but I do understand that if you're in this profession, you're always interviewing for a job, because you never know who you're going to need or how somebody's going to cross your path. And I think that's very important. I think small things like commenting on people's things on social media are ways for you to establish relationships.
Just like James. Yeah, Coach. James, I just met James yesterday, Coach. Just because he came on here, he watched every single video and was commenting. I mean, he might not have a guy's cell phone number, but he can comment, and he doesn't have to be, hey, Coach, I want a job, but it could be, say, hey, Coach, congratulations, something. So that's great advice, Coach.
Man, and one of the things I tell young people, because I have a lot of young people that I try to mentor, one of the things I learned in this coaching profession is mistakes that a lot of coaches make when they get head coaching and coordinator opportunities is they don't know people to hire. They haven't prepared themselves for the hiring process, and they may know 9 people they can hire on a certain level. But one of the things I learned is that you got to know people you can hire regardless of the level you get. If I only know Power 5 coaches that make Power 5 money, and
Yeah.
I get a job at a lower level, I can't afford to pay those guys. So if I hadn't taken the initiative to get to know some younger guys, to get some insight, know their backgrounds and observe them, then I've put myself in a position to where I'm going to have to hire a lot of people I don't know about. And
Yeah.
that's the fault that I think a lot of coaches make. I think you got to understand, if you do get in that position, if you're successful, you're going to lose people. So you better be prepared to replace them. So one of the things that I make a habit of doing is not only meeting younger people in the profession, but staying in contact with them. You know, they're kind of in all to get to meet you, and they're ambitious. But my mindset is this: I realize one day I'm going to be an old coach. And I realize one day they're going to want somebody younger to do exactly what I'm doing right now. I also realize I don't want to do this when I'm old, you know, but at the same time, I want somebody that is looking up to me right now, that I'm trying to pour into, that's one day going to become a head coach, to say, you know what, that guy would be a great director of player development. You
Yeah.
know, I read that guy's stuff all the time, and I know he can relate to players. He would be great to have on my staff to talk to my players about things that I don't have time to do, or I don't know how to do. So every single day, even though I have a job, I'm interviewing for a job, because I
Man.
understand that this thing is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to
Every
get to
day
that
is an
point.
interview. Every
Yeah.
day is an interview. I mean, because there's somebody that's always watching, and it isn't that, when you get face to face with the person interview, it's like, what did you do where your feet were, and not always looking to the next job. And I mean, James, you want a chance to network with Coach. I mean, he's on social media. You can hit him up anytime there. Just keep doing what you're doing, James. I mean, I really appreciate you, uh, Coach. The cheetah mentality. Where does that come from? What does it mean? I mean, it's branding. I mean, you are Coach Cheetah. Like my buddy Davon Morgan, who he played at Virginia Tech. He's the DB coach at FAMU.
Yep.
He was the Wizard, and every kid in the Richmond area knew him as the Wizard. So any Virginia Tech people out there, I mean, Davon, you're branded, Coach. You're Coach Cheetah. I mean, where did that come from? And tell us about that, Coach.
Well, it stems from my childhood. I was always fascinated with cats, and the cheetah was my favorite animal. Back when I was young, cartoons came on Saturday morning, and that was the highlight of your day. Getting up in the morning, doing whatever chores you had to do, and watching the Smurfs, Alvin and the Chipmunks. Masters of the Universe came on during the course of the week. But strangely, man, I was always one of those children that was addicted to National Geographic. And National Geographic has evolved into Animal Planet and some other things now. And
Yeah.
it wasn't just cheetahs. I was fascinated, which was a little bit weird. I was fascinated by cats killing animals. I just thought it was,
Yeah. I mean, it's the hunt. It's the running down
yeah.
somebody from behind.
And so, as I grew and I got into the coaching profession, that cat has always been something that I related to defensive back play. Because when you think about the characteristics of a cheetah, fast, instinctive, vision, change of direction skills, even the body type. Cheetahs are not as big as leopards, lions, or tigers. They kind of built like defensive backs, smaller, streamlined. And I think probably the most important thing you got to think about, because weirdly, I know a lot about cheetahs. Cheetahs are both predators and prey. So when you think about a corner being out on that island, being in a situation where they're either the hunted or the hunter, it's very important to know and understand that every day you get up, you either the hunted or are you either hunting or you're being hunted.
Yeah.
And so
Dog eat dog.
you think about being out there on the island as a defensive back, and the quarterbacks trying to get a beat off of what you're doing. Offensive coordinators are watching. You have people on the sideline trying to see if you're fatigued, and you can't show any sign of weakness. And those animals have to eat, then they have to go hide because their body weight is twice what it was from eating, and now they become vulnerable. So that's the fatigue. But I think just the mentality of that cat in particular relates to us. And just knowing that no matter how successful you are, you got to do it again and again. And that's the things that I try to instill in my players. But more than anything, that's how I try to live. That's how I try to walk. I've always been 5'9". I've never been any bigger than that. I realized coming out of high school that a lot of people were not interested in me because of my size. I didn't get mad at that. I didn't get upset with that because I still knew I needed to prove myself in order to get to where I wanted to go in life. And I've always been the type of person that, regardless of what I've accomplished, I'm never too prideful to have to prove myself again. And that just relates to the cheetah. Every day you want to eat, you got to hunt. And when I got to Duke University is when it really took off. You know, Coach Cutcliffe always wanted us to use one-word coaching phrases because back then we were running the high-speed offense, and you're having to get a lot of plays in to become efficient at it, and he was an offensive coach. So the last thing he wanted was a bunch of defensive coaches running out on the practice field, stopping practice, giving dissertations. So you had to, even in your drills, you had to have one-word phrases when you say one word, your players knew what it meant. Well, I'll give you a few things that cheetah means right quick. Say, for instance, a guy runs an out route, and I'm playing off coverage, and I break on the ball, and I go to make the tackle, and I try to tackle him high, and I miss him, okay? All I have to say is cheetah, and that immediately lets my guy know that he should have had his eyes on the hips of the receiver. He had his eyes on the shoulder pads. He had his eyes on the helmets. Therefore, he missed the tackle. That's one word. Okay, all of a sudden, completely different scenario. We're coaching one-on-ones. A guy runs a post corner on one of my corners. My corner immediately gets lost in coverage. He stares back at the quarterback, which is a lot of them do because of the panic sets in. Well, instead of running out there giving him a dissertation, all I have to say is one word, cheetah, which means he should have gotten his eyes to the near hip of the receiver and closed until he got in position to be able to turn around instead of looking back. Next scenario, far side corner on this side of the field, long run breaks. All of a sudden, he's in pursuit. He overruns. Runner cuts back, scores a touchdown. Instead of going over there giving a long dissertation, all I have to say again is cheetah, which means as he was pursuing across the field, he should have had his eyes on the near hip of the runner, which means that would have put him in position not to be cut back on. So right quick, there's 3 different things I gave you that cheetah means. But the defensive line coach can use cheetah. He's pursuing a guy on a toss sweep. He overruns it. Cheetah. Get your eyes on the hip. And cheetah allows you to play low. It allows you to get in position and allows you to do a lot of the things that we as coaches take a long time to teach. It's one word that means a lot of different things. And it relates to something that those guys can relate to. And the more they hear it, the more efficient they become at it. But more than anything, man, we didn't have a lot to hang our hats on when we got to Duke. And I didn't know what a pack of cheetahs was called. I found out in 2008 when I got there. And I looked it up, and it was called a coalition. And I did a little bit of research to find out that, you know, male cheetahs generally hunt alone. So envision yourself as a corner or as a safety in coverage. You're by yourself. But when they do hunt together, they will only hunt with their blood brothers. And they never practice hunting together, but strategically and instinctively, they know how to make things happen together. So you think about an entire secondary made up of a bunch of guys. You have to be brothers. You have to be on one accord in order to make things happen. If I'm playing cover 2, this corner down low has to know I got to get a jam on this guy in order for my safety to get over the top. So it just made sense to me to marry all those things together. And then here comes social media. So being able to incorporate all of these things on social media, it just took off. And we started playing well at Duke. And when I first got there wasn't a corner or a defensive back per se in the NFL from Duke. And there hadn't been one in the NFL in over a decade. There hadn't been one drafted in well over a decade. And we were able to get some guys in there and become successful. And some guys went on to the NFL. So it started to take on a form of its own. And my guys started to get tattoos. They started to get their hair done like cheetahs. So it really became a part of the brand. And probably the most beautiful thing about it, what nobody understands or knows, is I've got most all of these guys linked up together in group me's or different social media things. And not only has Cheetah been something that we've been able to use as a recruiting tool, and it's been something that guys want to be a part of, it's resulted in jobs. It's resulted in letters of recommendation. It's resulted in references. It's resulted in advice. You know, older guys talking to younger guys. Hey, man, I saw you on TV last night, man. Don't ever let anybody get under your skin and lose your composure like that. Hey, Coach Jones, man, can you give me number 43 number? I want to talk to him. Sure thing,
Wow.
man. You know, and because everybody relates to everybody. And we've created our own fraternity through that. And not only do I have a lot of guys in the business profession that are doing well right now, I've got a lot of coaches out there that have played for me. And even the guys that were not called Cheetahs from Tulsa and from Memphis, they now call themselves Cheetahs because they say, Coach, we were the originals. And I've got, one of my former players coaching at Arkansas, one of my former players coaching at UTSA, one of my former players is the special teams coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. So we've got guys all over the place that are doing well. And it's at the point now to where if I ask one of my guys, what are you looking to do in life? I probably got somebody that's a Cheetah that can help them, to accomplish or achieve that. So, it looks good. It's kind of cool, but there's a significance to it that really makes me passionate about it all across the board.
Yeah, Coach. I mean, I met you last year when we had the clinic at the hotel. I think that was the first time I ever met you. And then I can't even remember if I saw you at the party that y'all had before the clinic. But then, we spent a lot of time that day. And then you came to my school, a couple weeks ago. And now I'm talking to you, Coach. So, I mean, coaching is a fraternity. And sometimes I don't know, like everybody's so worried about beating everybody or, I don't like that guy. Can you talk a little bit about that, Coach? Because, there's going to be ups and downs in this profession, and you're not going to win every game, but you got to have, a vision for the future and a long-term goal. So what advice could you give to younger coaches that don't understand that this is a fraternity? The Cheetah is your specific fraternity, but that the coaching profession is bigger, than just what they may see as a win or a loss.
No doubt about it, man. I think when you think about it, I think everybody has to ask, why do you do what you do? Coaching is about relationships. Coaching is about helping people to get to a place that maybe they couldn't have got without you. Listen to what I said now. Coaching is about helping someone to get to a place they may couldn't have got without you. Let's be honest. A good athlete can score a touchdown without you. A good receiver can make a spectacular catch without you. A good quarterback can throw a ball without you. But it's the other things about coaching that matter. So if you're coaching only about wins and losses, you're coaching for the wrong reason. Think about this. All the people that you touch in coaching are not going to go play college football. All of them are not going to be coaches. But you have to give every single person that looks up at you when you call your team up at the end of practice, you have to give them something. Because I talked to you earlier about being that walking example. And you never know how that guy that's never going to play offensive line for you or that's never going to be a linebacker for you, you never know how your impact on him is going to affect the type of husband or father that he one day becomes. You never know how that guy is going to come back into your life one day and benefit you as a result of you not ignoring him and acknowledging the fact that he was a member of that team. I firmly believe that you have to coach all guys because you never know. Just because a guy isn't tall enough to play defensive tackle doesn't minimize his value as a father. I tell every guy in my room, scholarship, walk on, whatever it is, every last one of y'all got to be a captain because you're going to be a captain of something one day. Sit in front of your family and you've got 2 kids and you've got a wife sitting at the other end of the table. Don't minimize yourself because you are not good enough to play defensive tackle at the Power 5 level. You still have to be a Power 5 father in your household. And you don't think any less of yourself. And football is a chapter from a playing standpoint that ends. And the lessons that you learn from that chapter enables you to be able to come on and write other chapters. I hadn't played football in a long time. But that doesn't minimize me. I don't look at the fact that I didn't have a promising NFL career as I'm less of a man. I believe my steps are ordered. And whatever I'm assigned to do, I'm going to be the best version of myself in doing that. I'm going to leave an impact no matter what. And I'm going to leave an impact on people because that's why I do what I do. I think when people only look at wins and losses, how many games do you play? We're promised on the collegiate level 12 games. And if you're fortunate, you get to 13, maybe 14. Very few going to get to 15, because of the national championship. That's all squeezed into a 4-month period. Well, you're responsible for these guys 365 days of the year. So what else are you doing to them? What else are you doing to help them grow? Very rarely do I talk to one of my former players and they come back and say, Coach, I really appreciate you teaching me how to squeeze the receiver to the sideline. That changed my life. That's not life-changing. That's something that every single coach that's at a clinic in a room can do. You make an impact by doing things that other people don't take the time to do. You make an impact by consistently doing things that other people aren't consistent in doing. And sometimes that's talks. Sometimes those are conversations. Sometimes that's tough love. Sometimes, more than anything else, you have to understand the importance of being honest with people. As a coach, the most important thing I can give anybody that's under me is honesty. They may not always like it. It may upset them, but you know what? They'll always respect it. And you can't be a coach that shies away from being honest with players because it's uncomfortable. Life is uncomfortable, but people grow from overcoming uncomfortable situations. You know, a lot of people call it adversity. I don't call it adversity. You know, adversity is having a ailment at birth that doesn't allow you to do things. Growth is overcoming something that you didn't do right. It's not adversity. It's not adverse for me at 48 years of age. I'm never going to say it's a tough conversation for me to talk to an 18-year-old. I have a 30-year-old kid. So it's not going to bother me to have to talk to an 18-year-old. I feel like that's my responsibility. And I'm going to say it very bluntly because my father taught me never sugarcoat. Because when you sugarcoat, you leave room for people to speculate what you meant.
Mm.
When you put it out there, there's no reason for people to wonder, what did he really mean? And that's what you have to do. And I firmly believe that's what allowed me to have the relationships that I have with my players. That's what has allowed me to be able to maintain those relationships because they respect that. I mean, there's nothing I enjoy more in the coaching profession than getting those pictures at Christmas time on those cards or on social media now, seeing the birthdays and getting the text messages of the first child being born. I've been in my players' weddings. My wife and I are like the wedding people. You know, we look at our schedule, and every summer, you know, we plan our vacations around how many weddings we got to go to. Because I think it's important that I let those guys know what they mean to me. You know, they're the reason that I'm able to do a lot of the things that I've been able to do because of their output to me. So who am I to be so important that I can't take time to go to their wedding when I've talked to them the entire time that they've been sitting in my room about the importance of being a husband and father? It goes back to being a walking example. I'm a hypocrite if I talk about how important it is to get married and to become structured if I act like it's not important enough for me to attend these things. So although we can't attend them all, we try to attend as many of them as we could. And I enjoy it, man. Nothing better than going to one of those weddings and you hadn't coached one of those guys in 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and you get them all back together, and you just have a good time and be able to observe and see how those guys grow. So to me, that's what coaching is, man. I don't know how many games we won in 2008, 2009, 2010. Right. I don't remember. I just don't. But I know every single young man that sat in my room. And I think that's where you have to humble yourself and understand that when you're fortunate enough to call yourself a coach, that's what it means. It means that you help someone to get to a place that they couldn't have got without you.
Man, I love how you put that because, like, in our program, we say, 1, we're going to change lives. 2, we're going to help get them to the next level. So that means that we're going to make them better than what they would have been. That doesn't mean they're going to go D1. Doesn't mean they're going to go to the NFL. And then we're going to build champions for life. So, like, we tell our kids that so all the coaches know we're on the same page. And it's what I'm hearing from you. And you just don't say it. You live it. And, you know, that's what's so powerful because I had a coach on and he asked me, he was like, man, I'm from, you know, northern whatever in the country. He's a Yankee. He's from the north. But he said, I can't relate to these kids. They can't relate to me. You know, he had players look at him and say, you know, coach, you don't look like me, or coach, you don't understand me, or coach, you're trying to change me. He was like, I really don't know what to do. But every coach you've talked about has been able to relate to players no matter what they look like or where they're from. So, I mean, what can you really tell that guy? I mean, it isn't go get another job, you know, because he says, well, the last couple places I was at, I was able to do that better. I mean, how do you feel about that, Coach, what I'm telling you?
You know, I think it's a very valid point, and it goes back to what we talked about earlier, just about learning from people that you're around and mimicking that behavior if it's not a part of your natural character. What we do is about how you make people feel. But
Mm.
I think what we do is we get caught up in the accolades and we get caught up in what people accomplish. And we look at it more so as what can we enable people to do or accomplish. Man, drop your ego when it comes to coaching. Most good players were going to be good players regardless of who coached them. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, you mean to tell me that Deion Sanders, Charles Woodson were not going to be great players regardless of who coached them? But I see, when I look at Deion Sanders and the relationship he has with Mike Zimmer gave him something else. He was more than just a football coach to him. And I take pride in myself, and I tell every guy that I have the fortune to coach, regardless of their contribution to the team, if I am only a football coach to you, I have failed you as a man.
Wow.
And that's the reality of it, man, because I have an opportunity to help people grow. And to be honest with you, Coach, I have a lot more knowledge about life, fatherhood, being a husband than I do about coaching football. I'm a father every day. And I've been a father for a long time. I had my first kid when I was 18 years old.
Wow.
So I've been a father a long time. And I've watched a father a lot longer than I've watched coaches because I had the fortune of watching mine. And he's still alive to this day.
Wow.
And he still teaches me a lot of things that I learned. How often am I coaching? I'm a husband every single day. Last night, she hadn't come down here today, but I'm a husband right now. So that's something that I have to be all the time. And I think those are the things that you have to get good at. Like, Coach, I watched you for a very small amount of time in your classroom. And that did impact me because I'm appreciative of the fact that the energy you had, the charisma, and the knowledge of the subject matter that you were teaching made those kids want to learn. And think about this. I envy you in the sense of saying, okay, I admire you, not envy. I admire you in the sense of saying, okay, he gets a chance all day, every day to pour into people the way I like to pour into my 8 guys. I only have 8. And I'm not around those 8 that day. I'm in your classroom.
Man.
And I'm watching my watch trying to get to the next school, trying to get to the airport. How many students did you have come through your classroom that day that you impacted? And I look around that room. A lot of those young ladies don't wear shoulder pads.
Yeah.
That guy in the back of your room with the cowboy hat on, you had to stand up. You know what I'm saying? You're teaching them about Johnny Cash, okay? He's not concerned about how to read cover 2, but you're impacting that guy. So every coach needs to understand that we're teachers. And when you teach, you have a chance to reach people because some of the most important people in my life are my educators and my teachers. I wrote my book and I dedicated my book to a former teacher that I had. She never coached me to do anything, but she taught me a lot. And because of her impact on me, when social media came into play, I was always very conscious of how I wrote things and how I punctuated because she was my 5th grade English teacher. And she used to always stay on me about punctuation. So she impacted me from 10 years of age to I didn't reconnect with her till I was in my 30s. But she always had an impact on me. And when I saw she was on social media, this was pre-Twitter, this was Facebook. Before I hit post, I made sure that that sentence was written correctly because I did not want her to look at it and say, you know what, I taught him better. And she probably didn't think about it like that, but she did impact me, man. So you're impacting people. Your other coaches on here that get the privilege of teaching, you're impacting people. But any of us that are fortunate enough to call ourselves a coach, man, it's bigger than the game. It's life-changing. And that's why I'm passionate about doing what I do.
Yeah, Coach. I agree with you 100%, man. And I mean, I've only met you a few times, man. I mean, it's just great to talk to you. And, there sometimes as a coach, you think, well, is there anybody else out there like me? And there are. And it seems like the guys who are the best at it, they kind of share some of those same philosophies that you have, that we're changing lives. It just ain't about, teaching a guy how to play cover 2. So, Coach, if there's anything else, if there's a young coach out there watching, is there anything you'd like to leave the clinic with? And how can people stay up with you? But just any more wisdom that you would like to leave the clinic with before we sign off?
I think the biggest thing that I would like to leave everybody is, as coaches, we all deal in fundamentals, because whether you're basketball, baseball, football, soccer, there's fundamentals involved. The drills that you do every single day before you start practice, they're fundamental drills. It's footwork, it's hand placement, things like that. Well, understand this. Listening, networking, and communication have to be fundamental. Listening, networking, and communication has to be fundamental. They have to be things that you're about. They have to be things that you're consistent in doing. And they have to be things that become a part of your character and your DNA. When people reference you, they should say, this is a fundamental person because I've heard from him regularly. This is a fundamental person because he repeated something that I said on a Zoom clinic 4 years ago. This guy is fundamental because I had a conversation with him and I just loved the way that he presented himself and the knowledge that he had. Understand there's a time to listen and there's a time to talk because everything you do in life is an interview. And so if you're aspiring to do something, understand that you are your resume and communicating with people. Don't be the person that reach out to people only when they can help you. Be the person that reach out to people because it's a part of who you are. And those things stick with people. You're no different than the next guy if you call me the day that the job is posted. But if you call me regularly and you tell me who you are and you make yourself known to me, then I will know who you are when that opportunity presents itself. And I think, understand, those things don't cost anything. The only thing those things take is time. And anything that you want to be good in life at, you have to make a priority, which means you have to devote time to.
Amen. Amen, Coach. So how can people keep up with you? I got their Twitter down there, Coach, at Coach DJ Cheetah.
At Coach DJ Cheetah is on Twitter. Facebook, I'm a little old school. I still have a Facebook page. That probably shows more my real personality, my family, than anything else. It's just Derek Jones. And I think my Instagram is at Coach DJ Cheetah too. And maybe it's a 1 on the end of it. I'm not as much on Instagram. I post on there, but I'm a little bit of a dinosaur when it comes to it. I don't have a TikTok. I don't have a Snapchat. My daughter won't allow me to get on those because she says I overlap with her and she thinks it's weird when her friends are looking at me on social media. So we kind of separate those boundaries. And I can't handle but so many things at once.
No doubt,
as far as that goes. But even more so than that, Coach, my cell phone number is 919-812-6248. That's on my business card. So why would I keep it from anybody? Again, it's 919-812-6248. You can shoot me a text, reach out to me because I'd be a hypocrite if I told you it's important to stay in contact and introduce yourself to people, and I don't allow you to do that. But understand when you go to clinics, when you're at these conventions, go up and approach people, introduce yourself, grab business cards, and stay in contact. It goes back to, again, all of those things have to be fundamentals of yours. If you aspire to do anything, your habits should mimic it.
No doubt. Thank you, Coach, so much for spending time with us. Coach, we were on here an hour, Coach.
Hey, man, sounds good. Nothing else I'd rather do.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you, Coach.
I'm going to go see if my wife will go to breakfast with me now.
Yes, sir. That's a good move. Appreciate you.
Hey, man, I appreciate you having me on, Coach. Take care of yourself.
All right. I'll talk to you soon, Coach.